Hi everyone, this is Primetime Combat, and I'm joined today by the ex-UFC and current Bellator welterweight, one of Europe's best, Oliver Enkamp. Oliver, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm feeling good.
You're very welcome. So, firstly, let's talk about your last fight. You just fought Mark Lemminger at Bellator London about 10 days ago. It was a great
Yeah,
fight in which we saw you get what you call the inverted triangle with added arms choke finish. It was an
the
incredible
Enkamp
comeback.
squeeze.
The Enkamp squeeze, correct.
Yeah,
It was an incredible comeback from behind win. How did you feel before, during, and after the fight?
yeah. Um, just briefly going back to my last fight, I thought I couldn't have a worse build up to my fight because my last fight in the United States, I had a lot of injuries going into that fight, but I invested a lot of time and money and energy getting to the US and doing like a month of training camp there. So I didn't want to pull out, even though I had injured my rib cartilage and my back and so on. So I just did that fight and I thought everything will be better from here. And this training camp was actually great. And the only thing that was very good from my last fight was actually my weight cut, which was super smooth. And I think partly because it was kind of a lockdown in the hotel, so we didn't have anything to do or go or eat or. So it was a very Spartan week, staying in the hotel room, meditating and eating. Simple food, and my weight cut was super easy, so I had that lying in the back of my mind going into this fight, and I think I was too relaxed because now no lockdown. We had a very nice hotel, the Hilton, and it was a nice area. We stayed right across the street from the area where I fought. So during fight, with me and my brother would go around. We would go to some restaurants, and I would have some this and that to eat. I was very relaxed and in a good mood. But when it was time to do the weight cut, so I do this water loading. I'm drinking all the time, and for the last 24 hours, I cut out all the fluid intake, so I flush it out instead. And last time I got down to like 80 kilos, and then I lost about a kilo during the night. So I just took 2 kilos. That's about, I don't know, 4 or 5 pounds in water weight in the sauna, which was very convenient. And then I fought feeling great. But now my body stopped releasing fluid at 83.6. So this is the evening before, and I am 6.5 kilo. That's like, I don't know, twice as many pounds over my fighting weight. And I had to go to the sauna repeatedly. I had this sweatsuit on, so I would sweat even more. It was a very small and hot sauna. I only lost like 2 kilos, a bit more. So I had to do a bath after that, a hot bath, and I was sweating even more, covering myself in blankets. The morning after, I'm at like 80 kilos, so I'm still 3 kilos over. So I had to go back to the sauna early in the morning. And this whole process really wore me out. I think my body went into some kind of shock because I started getting cramps. Like I would just reach for my water bottle and my arm would be cramping, and I would stretch my leg and my calf muscle would be cramping. And I made the weight, but my face looked like a skeleton, completely fluid depleted. And I started hydrating again, but it was hard for me to recover from the big cut, and I couldn't do any exercise or move around because my muscles would cramp. And I would just keep drinking and adding salts and carbohydrates and everything I'm supposed to up until the fight. And then when we start to warm up in the locker rooms, the guy from the staff, Bellator staff, comes to me and said, "Oh, you're next up." We switched places, so I was supposed to start my high intensity part of my warm up, but now they told me I need to get ready because I'm next because they switched me and the fight before. So I was like, oh man, I haven't even tried to do any intense exercise. So anyway, I got my stuff. We got down to the arena, and walking up to the fight, and I'm starting to come into this focused mindset of performing And the fight starts. As soon as we enter like a clinch, I feel like my body's exhausted, and it's the start of the fight. I get Mark Lemminger down, and I tangle up his legs, and I'm about to punch, and I feel like, oh, there's no energy to punch. So I got like a feeling of hopelessness over me. Like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to finish this guy if I don't have an energy? And it's the start of the first round. So first round was all about like just surviving to me, but I had the top control for the most of the time. So I think I won that round. Second round, I come out and my legs are jelly from the start of the round. Even though I spent the time on top in the first, my legs are jelly, so I can't bounce or move. And I enter like a striking exchange, but I don't feel I have the pop or the speed in my hands. So he catches me in between an uppercut and a hook, and my legs go spaghetti. I try to grab his ankle and just survive that round too. And in my head, it's not about winning or performing, it's about enduring, which is not a good mindset to be in. And third round, I go out and I'm thinking I'm gonna hit him with a back kick to the body, and then if he lowers his arms next time, I'm gonna go into the head. But he steps in, we fall down, and my body just reacts because I've done this inverted triangle choke thousands of times. So even though I'm not really consciously there thinking about it, my legs and arms just move in the right direction, and I catch it. It's very tight, very deep, and he taps out. And it was such a relief. But I'm so exhausted, so I can't even feel any joy. I remember they raised my arm. We walk out to do the doctor medical check, and we go do interviews and everything. And my mind is just blurry. I don't recall anything of this happening. And we're in the locker rooms, and it feels like I just stepped into the time machine. So the last thing I remember is walking out to the fight. Everything is a blur, and then I'm here. So yeah, it was a very interesting fight, and I took a lot of lessons from it. I'm very happy I was able to pull off that choke in that state of being with everything that happened until that point. But that only made the victory sweeter, because that was the reward from me enduring, because I was close to tapping out in the first round. His chokes were very tight. I was close to passing out when he hit me twice in the second round. But in the third round, just because I endured those moments, I was able to get a highlight submission finish that will probably spin on the highlight reels for the rest of the year. So I'm just very grateful.
I'm sure it will, and it was a fantastic submission. Going back to how you were saying about the card placement and your fight order, do you know the real reason why your fight was changed to an earlier slot?
I didn't get any explanation, and we always plan ahead the warm up. Like, during this fight we do this fight we do this, so it's very scheduled. And when they come and just tell me that they changed the order, they mess up the whole warm-up routine, basically. So I don't know why.
And yeah, I'm not too sure why either. But going back to the submission victory, I guess there was a bit of confusion as well on what the submission actually was. Because Bellator, John McCarthy, they were all calling it the buggy choke, but I saw you on social media after the fight correcting people and telling them that, no, it's not the buggy choke. So you decided to claim it and call it the Enkamp choke.
Yeah. So technically the difference is like in a buggy choke, you catch him between your arm and your leg. But this choke was only using my legs. I just added the arms to catch his head and make it harder for him to escape. But the arms were not doing the choke, my legs were. So that's why it's a triangle choke with the legs in inverted position. So yeah, it's an inverted triangle with added arms, which made it look like a buggy choke.
That's great. And so this was your third time fighting in London. So what do you make of the London fans and actually fighting in London?
I love it. First and foremost, it's very close to home, so it's just an hour time difference. And secondly, the crowd is great. They really cheer you on, and you can feel the atmosphere. It's very tense, and I like that. It fires me up and makes me a better performer. So yeah, I love it.
Okay, so let's move on to your early life. So I believe you were born into a family full of martial artists. I know your brother is a very notable karate content creator on YouTube and very influential towards you. But could you just
Yeah.
explain what it was like for you growing up surrounded full of martial artists?
Yeah, so I was brought up in a martial arts center. My parents were my teachers. They were doing traditional karate. And my brother, who's 2 years older, he started as soon as he could walk. So basically, for me, it was just going to my parents' workplace, putting on the gi and going to work. So it was not something really I chose or was very fond of because I was a pretty lazy kid, to be honest. I like to stay home and play with my Legos or be out in the woods and fight with sticks. But karate was not my thing. But uh, it grew on me, and we started competing, and the competition part became a fun thing to center the training around, because now we would gather a bunch of friends and we would travel in a van somewhere, and the whole experience of competing was very fun to me, even though I'm not a competitive person. So it was not about the winning or losing, but about the whole experience. And when I just keep losing every fight, I realized, maybe I should, put some work into this next time to actually win. Because my first win was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to feel. So I learned discipline that way. And I was never like a natural in karate or anything. So I just started working hard, and during my teenage years, I took an interest in other martial art because our dojo grew into a martial arts center. So we added kickboxing and jujitsu, and I would try these different martial arts. I would go out running and start lifting weights, and took a real interest in fitness and exercise. So eventually, MMA was on the rise, and I saw successful karate practitioners win the UFC belt, like Lyoto Machida and George St. Pierre. And I thought I would give it a try. So I would go to other gyms, like learn the wrestling and grappling parts, and eventually started fighting as an amateur in 2010. It was 12 years ago. And I fought as an amateur for 4 years. I won 2 Swedish championships, the first ever they created in amateur MMA. We didn't have that rule set before. And then in 2013, I went professional. So from there, I was starting to fight in these smaller shows around Stockholm and Sweden. And I think because of all those losses in karate and eventually also in kickboxing, I learned the lessons I needed from my amateur fights. So I started winning when I became a professional. And my first 7 fights was all wins. And I think the majority of those were submissions, actually, because I put so much focus into my grappling, coming from a striking background with the karate and the kickboxing. Yeah, I can keep going because after the 7th fight, I had actually met and trained with Lyoto Machida. I got in contact with his brother Shinzo first, who is also a Bellator fighter. And then I just asked if I could come and travel to their dojo and try training there for a week. I think this was in 2016. Yeah. So I went over there and I trained with the guys, and I got very close relationship and felt like we were friends. And eventually I got introduced to Lyoto's manager, and this was now 2017, and the UFC is coming to Sweden. So a Norwegian fighter is going to fight there against Nordin Taleb, who is like a veteran in the sport. But he drops out on a 2 weeks notice. And Lyoto's manager, who now knows me, has very close relationship to the UFC. And he makes sure that I get to fill in that spot. So I get to do my UFC debut on a 2 week notice in the most iconic arena in Stockholm, where I'm from, the Ericsson Globe. And I still get goosebumps when I watch my walkout to that fight. The whole crowd standing up. It's like 13,000 attendants. And I see my name spinning around the globe, and I got this big, muscular, intimidating guy standing there in the octagon waiting for me. And that was actually my first loss, but I consider it my greatest win in my career because of all the platform and all the fans that got their eyes on me after that fight, because it was a great fight, a 3-round war, and I lost on decision, but I gained a lot of momentum in my career from that.
Well, you seem to win a lot of the fans and the media over with your performance. If we go back a little bit and talk about traveling abroad in training and furthering your knowledge, I believe you headed over to Okinawa, Japan several times, which is actually the birthplace of karate, for extensive training and to expand your knowledge. How much of an influence did this have to your career?
Yeah, so when I was focusing mostly on karate, me and my brother would travel a lot to competitions around Europe. And he moved to Okinawa, Japan for 6 months when he graduated high school. So he was studying at the university, but mostly it was not to learn the Japanese language, it was to train karate. And he trained with the national team coach, Sakumoto sensei. And then I traveled there to meet him after 6 months, and we would go around together. And I think in total, I went to Japan 6 or 7 times to train, and we have our old grandmaster there who taught us Kobudo, the weapon art, and it's a very interesting place. I would say one of the best places in the world to live if you want, like, if you enjoy like nature, downtime, no stress, good food. It's like, yeah, if you want a slow paced life, Okinawa is the place to be. And we would do group trips over there from the dojo as well. So we would gather a bunch of students doing karate, and we would travel together and train over there. So yeah, it gave me a lot of inspiration. And then I would come back home, and for a year I would train, and then I would go back the next summer. And when I started focusing more on MMA and wrestling, I would go the other way. So instead of going to the east, I would go to the west, to the United States, because that's where MMA is at its forefront.
And it's obvious that obviously Japan means a lot to you. Is there some part of you you want to fight in Japan eventually before you retire?
I mean, that would be very cool, because I grew up watching all the fights from Japan, the K1 kickboxing and the Pride Fighting Championships. So that was my first like real events I watched as a fan of the sport. So it would be very cool to fight there, as maybe to end the career or something. So yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
And also talking about traveling abroad, you also headed over to Thailand to train at Tiger Muay Thai and even had your first Muay Thai fight there, where you won via front kick KO. What was that experience like training in Thailand?
Yeah, so as I told you, my brother went to Okinawa when he graduated high school, and I went to Thailand when I graduated high school. So I was 18 years old, and I booked a flight with 2 friends from my dojo here in Sweden, and we would stay for 2 months at Tiger Muay Thai in Phuket and train and just enjoy life. And then the last week before heading back home, I took a fight, and that was my first fight with professional rules, like no shin guards or headgear or anything. And I think I was too unorthodox for this Thai guy, because they told me he was like a South Thailand champion, but I think they say that about every Thai guy. But he had like 100 something fights, and I was just all over the place, spinning around, spinning back fist, spinning kicks, and not fighting the usual Thai style that he's used to. And I don't think I ever trained the teep, the front kick to the head before, because it's considered kind of an ugly move to throw in sparring. But it just came out of nowhere, and I did that even before Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida and Sensei Seagal. So that was in 2010, and yeah, it was a very cool experience. I learned a lot from it.
Have you been back to Thailand since then?
Actually, I went back 8 years later in 2018 to the same place. And when I was there the first time, you had Tiger Muay Thai. There was another gym called Dragon Muay Thai. and like a restaurant where the fighters would go eat on this little dirt road, and the rest was just jungle. And now 8 years later, everything had exploded. There were like 5 Thai gyms, there was CrossFit gyms, there was like hotels, restaurants, fight shops, you name it, like fully packed of life and activity and people walking around everywhere. So it's really commercialized now, the Muay Thai and the training. And also because they legalized MMA, you weren't allowed to fight MMA in Thailand because it was not good for their national sport of Thai boxing when I was there the first time. But second time, they legalized it. So now people travel from all over the world to train MMA there too.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you touched upon your UFC debut, but unfortunately, in your second Octagon appearance, it did not go to plan, which saw you let go by the promotion. However, very soon after that, you signed with Bellator MMA, and since then, you have an impressive 4-1 record inside the Bellator cage.
Mm.
What was the transition from UFC to Bellator like, and what do you put down to your recent successes?
Yeah, I think those 2 losses in the UFC made me into the fighter that I am today, because I was very attached to the idea of being a pure karate fighter in MMA, representing karate and doing the karate style. So I would not focus too much on other aspects of the sport where I thought I didn't want to spend too much time fighting in, like the boxing range, for example, because I was a long distance fighter and I had great submissions for the back, but I wouldn't focus too much on my takedowns because I thought I would just stand up, you know. But I realized after my second fight that you can't pick and choose, because in MMA today, you need to know all aspects of the fighting game, and a good opponent will take you into the deep waters where you're not comfortable. So you need to be good everywhere. So I really focused on the boxing and the wrestling, which was the parts I felt lacking more in. And that gave me not only technical and tactical skills, but overall confidence. Confidence in that I was a very well-rounded fighter, and I think the boxing made my kicks better and the wrestling made my grappling better. And, you know, everything is combined in MMA. It's its own unique sport. You can't be a separate martial artist. You need to be a mixed martial artist. And so I racked up those 3 first-round finishes in my first 3 Bellator fights against highly dangerous opponents. And I think it was because of those 2 losses before that made this shift in my mindset. And then the 4th fight obviously was the injury-filled training camp where I had less than optimal circumstance to fight. But anyway, I took the fight. And then this last one I just talked about. So I'm back in the winning column and I'm planning on staying there.
So I know your last fight was in front of a big crowd in London, but you did also fight during COVID and without fans in the crowd. What was that feeling like, fighting without any fans in the crowd?
Yeah, so I actually had a pretty good timing with the whole pandemic thing. So in my last fight, in before this one in the US, they allowed a little bit of crowd in. So it was not a fully packed arena, but there were still people watching. The fight before that was in Paris, and they just released some of the lockdowns before we got there. So they also allowed, I think, like it was a few thousand that could be in this arena, but maybe they allowed 1,000 or something. So it was still a crowd. And the fight before that was in Dublin, and it was right before the lockdown. So I timed my fight before and after. So I was able to fight with the crowd actually for all those fights just because the timing was great. So I never got to experience the empty arena completely.
And you seem
Well,
to.
actually, in my Bellator debut, because that fight was postponed during the night, so they would move it later and later, and eventually I would fight after the main event. So it was basically an empty arena because the whole audience had gone home after the main event. They didn't know there was one fight left. So the only people left in the audience was my opponent's fans because he was the hometown fighter. So that was kind of an empty arena, I guess.
So you fought in different places around the world. You fought in Sweden, you fought in England, you fought in Dublin, Ireland, you fought in Paris, and you fought in America. Is there some part of you who wants to, fight in different places around the world just to experience these different adventures per se?
Sure. I mean, martial art has taken me all over the world, all of the United States and Thailand and Japan and all those places we talked about. So I think that's a big part of my motivation is seeing different culture and experiencing different countries because of my martial art, because that has taken me all over the globe. So it's a big part of the joy in the whole journey that I'm chasing right now.
We go back to your last fight in London. On the same night, there was the Bellator Welterweight interim title fight between Michael Venom Page and Logan Storley. What did you make of that fight?
It was a very interesting fight. So I was in the audience for that one because I didn't want to miss it. I'm a big fan of MVP and his fighting style. He's a very entertaining fighter. And it was interesting to see how he would face a wrestler of that caliber. And the first thing that comes to mind is just the composure of Logan Storley having the whole audience against him, because he was booed all the way out to the cage. And then MVP took his good time to come into the cage with doing his performance and antics, and the whole crowd cheering for him. So Logan was a real underdog in this fight. And we got to see what we expect from MVP, the bouncing around, a lot of pressure, a lot of great kicks. But I think, again, Logan Storley had great composure, and he didn't get invited into these striking exchanges, which would not have ended good from him probably. But he had great reactions for his takedowns. As soon as MVP would blitz in, he would just shoot for the legs and be able to control the fight on the ground. And he did this in every round of the fight. And I know this is a very controversial subject. Like, should you give the win, if it's a decision, to the guy who controls more or the guy who tries to finish more? And I had this debate in my last fight before this one, when I fought a wrestler and I went for all the submission attacks and striking, and he would just try to hold me and squeeze me without, attacking really. But then they gave him the win. So I think it's not unfair, the decision between MVP and Logan. I think Logan did he followed his tactic great, and made the best man win. That's what I think every time, and I'm a fan of both these guys.
So if we talk about the winner, Logan Storley, so he's going to unify his belt against the current champion Amasov. Obviously, Amasov is currently away in Ukraine. Who do you have for that fight? I know they fought before and Amasov won by a decision, but who do you have for this rematch?
Honestly, I this was the first fight I saw with Logan Storley, so I don't have a lot of knowledge about his previous fights or how they turned out. But I know Amasov has great wrestling as well, so it's an interesting matchup. And I think it's going to come down to who has the better striking, because two great wrestlers might cancel each other out, and the one with better striking or submissions may get the win. So before giving a good answer, I would have to do some more research on that.
And if we talk about Michael Venom Page, is that someone who you'd love to get in the cage with, and face off one day?
No, because it would be too hard finding an opponent, training partner that can simulate his style. I'm very impressed by guys who have done that before, because his style is so unique. So I don't know who should I, train with to imitate that. But we'll see what happens.
So now looking into the future, looking at the top 10 rankings, I believe you are truly due a ranked fighter for your next fight. Which type of opponent are you looking for? Do you want to get into the top 10 as soon as you can? Or do you want to keep gaining experience and getting wins before making a title push?
I always have the same answer for this question, and it's that I like to fight the guys that would give the most entertaining bouts. And now I fought two wrestlers in a row, so I think a striker would be fun for my next fight, to make a real dynamic fight for the audience. But I don't have much say in it, to be honest. It's whatever Bellator thinks. They give me a few names maybe, and I can say yes or no. But at the end, it's their choice.
And one final question on this part: is there a preferred destination where you want to fight next? I know they've got a Dublin event in September.
Yeah, that would be great because I fought in Dublin before. I love the 3 Arena where I fought, and also it's close to Sweden, so the time difference, which plays a big factor in recovery and such, that's a great opportunity.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to some quick fire questions. So these can be about yourself, about you as a fan, and just to get your thoughts and feelings towards our sport. So the first question is, what's your favorite fight of all time?
Ooh, I really like watching Henderson Silva and Sakuraba, Genki Sudo, some of the old school fighters. But one real good war that comes to mind is actually Michael Chandler against Ben Henderson. If I remember correctly, this was in Bellator long time ago. But I just recall that was a real war and a great fight. Also, Ben Henderson against Anthony Pettis when he does the Showtime kick off the cage. That's a good one that comes to mind.
And I think what people don't know about that actual move is that didn't end the fight. The fight went to decision.
Yes.
A lot of people think that was a knockout finish.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next one. The favorite finish from one of your fights?
MMA fight or any fight?
Any fight.
Any fight. I have to say my first Swedish championship in MMA, I do a check hook. I step to the left and I throw a hook on his chin and he falls face down flat, 6-second knockout. So maybe that one.
It's very impressive. Your favorite knockout ever that you've seen?
Oh, what's his name? Raymond Daniels, Bellator. He one of his previous fights, he does like a 540 spin jumping twist, and you think he's gonna kick, but he lands and he punches instead, and he knocks the guy down.
And you can really hear that. You can really hear it on the camera, on the video.
Yeah.
Your favorite submission to practice?
I like Kimuras because they can be used from so many positions. So that might be one of them. Yeah, I'll go for Kimura.
And your favorite kick to practice?
Oh, spinning back kick. Yeah, that's my hardest kick, I think. But it's tricky to get the right setup, the right timing.
And in your opinion, who is the greatest of all time?
John Jones, no question.
That's a very mixed question, actually. You get a lot. I had someone say GSP yesterday. I don't know what I know you credited GSP earlier and someone that you watched when you were younger.
Yeah, I think he's definitely always in that debate. But I think John Jones, from the legendary names he fought, like he fought all those guys that you watched coming up into the sport, and he was so young doing it. He became the champ. He was like 22 years old or something. It's insane. And the way he fought he's the smartest fighter tactically that I think I've ever seen, because he does what you're not expecting him to do. For example, he fought like Chael Sonnen, who was a short notice stepping for some other fight. And what Chael Sonnen does is always shoot for the double leg straight away. John Jones go for the double straight away. So he takes the other guy's game. And I remember, for example, he fought the Glover Teixeira, who is great in the pocket, with heavy hands. So John Jones steps into the pocket and starts throwing his elbows. he always does the unexpected, and I think that's what makes him a great fighter. So you can never know what version of John Jones you'll fight.
And I'm sure you watched this fight at UFC 165 against Alexander Gustafsson. That's another
Yeah,
fantastic fight.
yeah, it's a great one. And being a Swede, obviously, I was cheering for Alex, but I remember John Jones after the fight said like that he had been out partying the week before, and he had his preparations were not optimal. I don't know if that's true or not, but you know, you might take that into consideration because it was a very, very close fight.
Do you have any routines or superstitions before a fight?
I wouldn't say superstitious, but I have a lot of routines to get into the right mental state of mind and to perform because I'm a very like relaxed and happy person normally, but I need to flip a switch in my mindset to be more ruthless. So I use a lot of words and the pictures as triggers, and also songs, listening to certain type of music, and repeating mantras or words for myself that puts me in that state of mind of performing. It's a way more dark mindset than I would have normally. So people that knows me very well, they would probably not recognize me in the locker room before the fight, but from these past 12 years I learned, and from experience, that this is the state I need to be in to perform on my peak.
And your most notable moment of your career?
That must have been when I did my walkout in the Ericsson Globe at my UFC debut, because that was such a jump in competition from these local smaller shows, and that really kickstarted my career and sent me into Bellator, where I am right now. But yeah, that was a pivotal moment in my whole life, actually. And also, like, it was such a growing experience from a personal standpoint, because I had to conquer a lot of fear and anxiety. I would have this anxiety attacks that came from nowhere during the first week leading up to the fight, because I didn't know if I was good enough, and it was such a big platform, and I didn't want to make a bad first performance. So overcoming those, I told my coach that no matter the outcome of this fight, I will be so proud just going through this whole process and mental torture that it was, that I will frame my gloves and put them on the wall, and I did.
Well, and after that performance, you should be very proud. Your go-to food after a weigh-in?
Usually I just start by drinking. I make these small bags with white powder that looks very suspicious when I travel, but they consist of carbohydrates and electrolytes and creatine and other things. But my first meal that I use to break my fast is often sushi, because white rice is easy on the stomach, it's quick carbs, and some fat and proteins from the fish. It's easy to digest.
And your go-to food after a fight?
After a fight, actually, I look forward to a big ice cold beer. It was one of my coaches after the Dublin fight or the London fight that got me into drinking beer, because I didn't like it at all. And he was like, "Of course, we need to celebrate with a beer." And he bought me this like super beginner friendly beer that was very sweet and fruity, and it became like a thing. After a fight, I would drink a big beer, and then I started enjoying it, actually. So that's what I celebrate with after the fight. And usually I'm not hungry, because all of the hormones, the adrenaline is still in your body, in your system for a few hours. So usually I don't eat a lot until breakfast the day after the fight.
And finally, what's something that your fans don't know about you?
That's a fun question. Um, well, I guess a lot, but I mean, you get one picture of me from what I portray, because I use my social medias for my fighting persona. Um, but I'm much more than a fighter. I do other things surrounding martial arts, and I have other interests as well. And like my biggest, what people probably don't know, like what I do in my spare time, one of my biggest interests is in let's say like mysteries. I love reading and watching video and documentary about like ancient cultures, like near death experiences, like spirituality, yoga, and things that our consciousness kind of things that we can't experience with our five senses. I think it's very interesting, the paranormal and stuff. So I can dive into a rabbit hole videos on that for hours. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So right now we'll move on to the fan questions. So you've got quite a lot of fan questions here. So we'll start with Abhay, who asks, what martial arts should I start with if I want to become a fighter?
Wrestling. Because MMA today, it's still an evolving sport and it changes every year. But what we see is the wrestler dictates where the fight will take place, on the feet or on the ground. So that's kind of a great foundation to have. And then you would add boxing on top of that. And then you would add the submissions and the kicks. So in that order, I would start.
Next question is from Adam.
Plus, yeah, let me just add, if I ever get kids, I will put them into wrestling practice straight away, because it's very like you get so athletic because you get great strength. Like the strongest persons I've shaken hands with are wrestlers. You get great cardio because it's such high intensity sport, and you get super flexible and mobile because you see high like all these buff wrestlers, they do like head flips and go down into splits and bridges and everything. So it's very all-round athletic sport. Yeah, just an addition.
Next question is from Adam Cullen, who's actually a Cage Warriors lightweight fighter who I had on yesterday. He asks, how would you compare fighting for Bellator against fighting for the UFC?
I would say in the UFC, there's a reason why they are on top, because it's like a well-oiled machinery that just moves around the world, and everything is super organized and structured and just works the way it's supposed to. You feel very well taken care of. And they have the UFC Performance Institute and all of this that really makes you feel privileged to be in the UFC. No other organization has that similarity. So your experience with events can vary a lot depending on where you are in the world. But I've been treated great by Bellator, so I'm happy with where I'm at. And they would actually match my contract coming from the UFC when it comes to fighter pay and such. So it didn't feel like I was downgraded by any means coming into Bellator. I just felt proud to be the only Swede at that point to represent Bellator. And my goal was, as soon as I got in contact with the promotion, was to bring it to Sweden, which is a great mission for me.
Yeah, hopefully so. Alex asks, do you teach yourself new things in your own time, or do you stick to your coach?
I learn things every day from everywhere that makes me a better fighter. And I think I can credit a lot of my technique and skills from teaching. So there's actually studies that shows that the best way to learn yourself is by teaching others. So when they compare to reading information, listening to information, and sharing information, that's one of the best things to make it stick in your own body. And me being a coach for so many years, running my own martial arts center now that was in my family, I think that has helped me a lot as a fighter. And If I'm not learning from my coaches, I take inspirations from other martial artists or other fighters that I watch. Or if I encounter a problem during my sparring, I will research it. I would find fighters that are good at this technique that I'm struggling with. So yeah, I think that's one of the most important things as a martial artist, to have longevity in the sport, constantly improving, and that's it's a Japanese word called kaizen.
Left Dress asks, what is your morning routine?
Uh, yeah, I had a period of time when I was super stuck into routines, but I find having too strict routines deprives me of my creativity. So I'm trying to be more spontaneous, but I like to start my days out with sunlight, because it's very important to get sunlight in your eyes, because that starts a clock in your head when you're supposed to go to bed and release melatonin, the sleep hormone, like 16 hours after. Yeah, getting hydrated, having a big glass of water before I drink any coffee or anything, and then I do some light stretching just to wake the body up. So basically, that's the only like routine really I have. But how I do them, in what order, that may vary. So right now we have great weather here, and I just fixed my balcony here in Sweden. So my morning routine has been go out on the balcony, do my stretching there, drink my water, and then have a cup of coffee and just listening to the birds. That's a great morning routine.
No, it sounds great. Connor asks, at what age do you plan on retiring, and is there a main goal you want to reach first?
I don't plan on retiring. My mom is 65. She's still going strong. But what I do with my martial art might change, if it's fighting or just teaching or doing seminars or whatever. But martial arts to me is a lifestyle. So it's what I was born doing. It's probably what I will do until it's my time to go. Um, but in what promotion or with what fight I will finish my career, I don't plan it, because we live in the now. So I just take fight to fight, and I know my mindset can change like during one night or day. So I don't try to plan too far ahead, but do the best of every day.
And I know we mentioned it earlier. Seamus asks, are you going to fight in Dublin again?
I hope so. We mentioned that September card, and that would be great timing, because I have the whole summer to train and then get that fight in the beginning of autumn, and then maybe even get another fighting before the year ends. That would be optimal for me.
Kafo asks, what is your secret to overcoming joint pain?
Omega 3s, a lot of omega 3s good for your joints. Light movement, so keep a mobility routine, stretch a lot, don't lift too much weights without adding a mobility routine, and have the courage to rest. I have to tell myself that all the time. Like, I feel that I'm just being a sissy, I should go train, but my training gets way better when I take an extra day during the week to rest and recover. And that's actually when we get stronger, during the rest and not during the training.
And I think the worst thing is when people overtrain or overwork, and that's what really hinders the body and the development. And also for
Yeah.
a fighter, if you overtrain, you,
Yeah.
you feel more fatigued and you're not going into the fight right. So it's very important to have that balance.
Exactly. Totally. I can add another thing I just thought of: heat and cold, like cold plunges and saunas, great for recovery and for blood circulation. So I think that can help with the joints as well. Why not add combine stretching in the sauna?
And talking about cold therapy, the next question, Jamie asks, have you ever tried cryotherapy?
I have at the UFC Performance Institute. I had one of those, but I much more enjoy going into the cold plunge, like preferably outside in nature, like a lake or the ocean. I feel it feels healthier to me doing the real thing than getting that cold nitrogen on your body. Mm-hmm.
Next question from Ezio. What is your favorite place to go on holiday?
I like to visit new places because there's so many countries in this world, so I wouldn't go to the same place all the time. But like I have so many memorable places I've visited. Iceland is amazing. The nature. Hawaii is amazing. Obviously Japan and Thailand that we talked about already. But I can tell you a place I want to go that I haven't been, New Zealand. I would love to explore that because I'm a very adventurous type of guy. And I know there's a lot of adventures to do over there, like surfing and diving and zip lining and stuff. So that's on my bucket list.
And final question here. Heinz asks, what's your favorite martial arts film?
One that I often speak about because it's easy for normal persons that are not martial artists also to enjoy is The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. I love this old kung fu flicks, but I think you need to be more of a martial art nerd to enjoy them as much as I do with like Jackie Chan, for example, like Drunken Master. That's one of my favorite movies. But yeah, The Last Samurai, I think is a great like Hollywood-esque movie for anyone to watch and experience the Japanese culture and mindset as well. It's a good one.
I think we're going to wrap it up here, Oliver. I just want to say a big thank you to you for taking the time out of your day and speak to me and share your interesting stories and your thoughts on certain aspects of MMA. It's very evident that you're an extremely humble, motivated, and hardworking athlete, and everyone at Primetime Combat wishes you the very best for the remainder of your career. Thank you very much, Oliver.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.